and welcome. Now, many of us here at IIT hope to one day become software engineers, computer scientists, or data analysts, or any of the diverse jobs that the tech sector has to offer. Regardless of whatever job you land, once you enter the corporate world, every one of us would like to move up the corporate ladder. And here with me today is someone who did just the same. He has risen through the corporate ladder to become a chief technical officer over the years. He's an award-winning software architect and technology advisor with a track record of enabling Fortune 500 enterprises and startups alike to realize their vision through disruptive technology solutions. He also is an enterprise architecture veteran with a focus on big data analytics, cloud transformation, and microservices backed by success stories in aviation, hospitality, edtech, fintech, and insurtech domains. Allow me to welcome Mr. Johan Lienegger. Welcome, sir. Truly an honor to have you here.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
I'm certain you have been asked this question before, but what made you work in the IT sector? What was the driving force as a child that kept you wanting to go down that path?
Well, I always liked technology, even as a child. So, but the thing was, back then we didn't have computers around. So, but I was lucky that at my school, in the computer lab, so we had some opportunities. And when I was in year 4, this was around 1995. So there was this introductory program where they taught us a little bit of coding using something called GW Basic, which I don't think most of you have even heard of. So this was a DOS-based programming language. So we were kind of like, exposed to it a little bit with a couple of sessions, but I really liked what I got to do, instructing computers to do what I wanted the computer to do rather than just clicking and operating things, typing commands and all that. So this got me really hooked onto it. So I kind of remember forcing my parents to enroll me in a computer programming course. At that age, it's quite unlikely, but me and another friend of mine, we enrolled in the program, and I was about 9 years old, and everyone else in the class was around 18 years old, at least, I think. So, but it was a challenge, and we really liked doing that one. So that's how I got the intro into IT sector and programming. And because we were kind of competing with these elder people, it felt like a challenge, and that kept me going. And after I completed that course, I kind of found a book on Visual Basic and started trying things out. Now, earlier, when I was doing the DOS thing, we didn't even have computers that much. So I didn't have a computer at home. So I was writing things on a piece of paper and trying it out when we get a session in the labs. That was very common at that time. So, but later on, I was lucky enough to have my own computer at home, and I was in about grade 9. And then I kind of started learning Visual Basic on my own. So really liked coding. So that kind of kept me in touch with programming and all that throughout my school life. And then that made me select a program afterwards for my bachelor's, which focused on software engineering. So that's how I got into IT.
That was something interesting. So becoming a CTO is a remarkable achievement in and of itself. What were the rigors you had to go through during this long journey?
So I believe myself to be lucky as well. It was very interesting. I was lucky enough to have amazing mentors and leaders in my journey. So, for example, at my first company, my first manager, he identified my skills based on the conversations that we had early on. And he was very helpful throughout to open doors and encouraging me to try things out. So it's not always easy, especially as a junior. One thing is if you go and try to change too many things, or even if you want to challenge how things are done at a given organization for some time, it's not easy. There is always resistance, and then there will be criticism coming in, and you might not even have the confidence to really push things forward because you are new, you don't know how things work. But I was lucky enough to have a supportive team around me. And these amazing bunch of people, they believed in what I was saying and showing through different examples and all that. So they kind of encouraged that. So I consider myself to be very lucky in that regard to have a very supportive team. And this is not quite uncommon. As a culture, I really believe, like, with the open, very friendly culture that we have in Sri Lanka, this is the common situation out there. So if you really try to work with people, they would listen to you and help you. So I was lucky enough to have people like that. So that was one of the first challenges, having that confidence and all that. And then there's another side to it. When you get opened up to the international arena, things change again, because we are coming from a small island country in the Indian Ocean, and especially like when you consider countries like the US, Europe, and when you work with such teams, like it becomes you might sometimes feel like, is it the right thing to do, like the confidence and all that to push different ideas through. That was another challenge I had, but then I very quickly realized that, like they're all the same. It's a very connected world today, and it doesn't, all the programs that we go through are the same ones like even a US student would go through. So it's the same curriculum, same things that we do. So once you start working, like you get that confidence as well, but it doesn't really feel natural at once. But once you get that, it makes everything much easier, where you can like go and challenge and work with architects around the world. So those were some of the milestones that I had that I can think of.
Okay. Adding to my previous question, what were the major learnings in that journey that had a profound impact on you?
Okay, let me take an example about this one. So in my first job, one situation that I had was, like I talked about changing and challenging things earlier, right? So one thing that happened to me was we were working on application framework that had been around for some time, and I felt like we can do things better. But I was a junior engineer, and I also had the feeling, what do I know about like these things? But we didn't have time in the project, which is the common case. Like in any software delivery project, you wouldn't have a lot of R&D time to go and like play around with different things, because clients want value and there are deliverables to be achieved and there's a fixed timeline. So we had all those constraints in that project, and I thought maybe like I will write my own framework on my own time. And I did that like after hours, and then afterwards, like we had this was around April, so we had the out of the vacation time as well. So in about a couple of weeks, I had an alternate framework with latest technology in place. So I took it to the company, and then had a chat with my boss, and then I showed it to him. This is like he was very supportive about it, and then we had some chats with some architects, and then they liked what they saw. They gave me some time to like polish it, and they gave feedback. I incorporated those feedback, and then we kind of rolled it out for that project, and then it became the company-wide framework eventually as well. So this is a major learning for me, because then I realized I really don't have to wait until someone comes and tells me or gives me a task and asks me to do that. Because we can try things on our own and push forward. And this really helped me to like rise the ladder very fast, because that gave me a seat with the senior folks in the company when it comes to technology at a very young age. So that's one key learning I had. And the second one is like the self-confidence aspect. I talked about it earlier as well, because you need to have a lot of self-confidence in tech to go and suggest solutions, because most of the time our role as consultants to look at the problem that a client is having and give a solution. So to give solutions, you need to believe in yourself. But one thing I want to note here, based on my experience working with different engineers over the years, is that like self-confidence and being stubborn and arrogant can, some people might mix it up. So that's where we had to be very cautious. We had to have the self-confidence, but we should listen to others and like get the point across in a way where everyone will feel open to it. So those are some learnings that I had.
Thank you for sharing those advices as well. So as a CTO, what type of work culture do you encourage?
Right. So I've been through different companies in my career, and I have seen different cultures, but I think what worked really well is the open, flat culture that we have at my current company. Because one thing that we promote is we don't really care about the number of years of experience or the designation. Be it an intern or whether it's a CTO, if an idea is good, we respect the idea and we try to like, make room for that. Everyone like, is treated the same way. But this doesn't mean that we do not respect seniority. We do respect seniority, and like we respect ideas, but that designation and just giving orders or anything like that never happens. So all the doors are open, all the way up to CEO. You can go and talk to anyone. And with that kind of a culture, we can nurture innovation, because when you have a lot of corporate red tape and different like things getting in your way, it's very hard to innovate. I have seen that happening in different companies in the past. And this is something I'm trying to actively avoid. You need certain processes in place to run a company, but that should not get in the way of innovation. So that's the kind of culture that I would like to encourage in any company that I work for.
Okay, with that, we'll go for a short commercial break.
පිට්සා වලට අද ක්‍රෙඩිට් කාඩ් ඔෆර් එකක් තියෙනවා.
එක්කමට පිට්සා ඕනේ නැහැ.
අයියෝ ඇයි අපි ඕඩර් කරමුකෝ.
මම එච්චර කැමති නෑ පිට්සා ගන්න.
බොරු කියන්න එපා. එහෙනම් එදා කෑවේ? හරි හරි. අපි හැමෝම ෂෙයා කරලා බිල ගෙවමු.
මම පර්ස් එක ගෙනල්ලා නැහැ. අනික පර්ස් එකේ තමයි කාඩ් එක තියෙන්නේ.
තාම IP දාගත්තේ නැද්ද? දැන් බැංක් account එක විතරක් නෙවෙයි. ක්‍රෙඩිට් කාඩ්, ඩෙබිට් කාඩ් සේරම IP app එකට දාගන්න පුළුවන් නේ. පර්ස් එක උස්සගෙන කාඩ් සේරම අරන් යන්න ඕන නෑ.
ලංකාවේ වැඩිම දෙනෙක් භාවිතා කරන ෆයිනෑන්ස් ඇප් එක iPay.
Speed is the new currency of business. In the new digital economy, effective competition requires a balanced approach to deep digital transformation that drives direct business value. By combining frictionless technology delivery with deep industry expertise, Virtusa helps business move forward faster. We help our clients advance to their optimal business state and achieve quick and continuous return on their investments. And we accomplish this through our digital transformation studio approach. Our approach leverages a unique combination of tools, assets, and people to drive over 30% efficiency and speed in delivering digital transformation.
Welcome back, viewers. We have Mr. Johan Lienegger with us today. So continuing the discussion further. Well, this question is certainly bound to either provide relief or anxiety to many who are watching this. The IT sector is notorious for being rather competitive and cutthroat. As someone who has overcome that and now possesses a better view of the IT sector, do you believe that it would change?
Well, I wouldn't call it cutthroat, but I would say it's definitely competitive. But the way I see it, competition is really good, and competition is what drives innovation. I mean, if you look at like the moon landing, it happened because of competition, and once that was achieved, when competition died down, not a lot of progress happened in that front, right? So that applies to any industry or any individual. Competition drives innovation, especially at different companies, at like the company level and as well as individual level. But what happens is sometimes competition can get out of hand, and it might defeat the goals of the organization. So as long as competition happens to promote the goals of the organization, that's really good. So it's all about value creation, right? So clients come to us for software services companies to get value created through different solutions that we are building. So if competition leads to individuals trying out different ways to do things better, that's going to help all us out and elevate everyone to a higher level. But when it happens in a way where you're trying to undermine the other person who's working next to you, then that's really bad. That's value destruction. So that's what we have to be very careful about. So I believe competition is to be a very good thing. And even if if we believe it's not good, and if we don't really try to nurture such kind of environment, we are in a very competitive global landscape. Other countries will move ahead of us. So competition has to be in the IT industry. but I wouldn't call it cutthroat. And I think it's kind of like, looking at how things work out. I think it's at a right level right now in the industry, but it's tough. But I think once you get into it, you get used to it as well.
Thank you. Following the pandemic, working from home has slowly become a very normal part of the life. How does that affect your work as someone who is tasked with overseeing an organization's project? Has it made your life easy, or has it added more strain to your life?
A bit of both, to be honest. So I personally believe work from home is good in many different ways, especially because you get to spend time, with your family, and you have a lot of personal time this way rather than getting stuck in a long commute. That had been a challenge. And sometimes, what happens in the IT industry is we don't work from 9 to 5. Sometimes we start late and work late, and sometimes we might leave a little early. So all of those things are there depending on the situation of the projects that we have. But commute always gets in the way. And if you have to spend 2 hours or 3 hours in a vehicle every day, that's a waste of a lot of time. So we don't have that with work from home. But the challenge is this also blurs the boundaries that we have about working hours. So sometimes many people have told me they feel like we wake up in the morning and we start working and then we go to sleep. And it's all work that we have done during the entire day. So that is something we have to be very careful about, so that we draw those boundaries and we take some personal time, because work-life balance is very important. You can work really hard for many days and try to get something done. But then again, if you really look back at the work output that you have gotten, sometimes it's not the same because you are stressed out. And IT, and especially when you are trying to do coding work and design complex systems, it's very stressful. It's very important that we take those breaks. So that's something we have to be very careful with the work from home setup that we have. Now, as someone who is looking after multiple teams, one of the bigger challenges I have with working from home is maintaining the culture. When you're in the office, when you see other people working next to you, it's very easy to get people to adapt to a company culture. But building company cultures remotely is very hard, because for whatever the reason, one thing I see is that with the folks that we have in Sri Lanka, sometimes it's very difficult to get them to even turn on the camera in a meeting because people feel reluctant to do that. I understand why people would feel that way. But when you don't even see the other person that's working with you, it makes things very difficult to really understand what is not being said in a chat message or what is not being said through voice, because most of the communication and understanding each other happens through facial expressions and all that as well. We're missing that. So building company cultures and building empathy towards others and understanding what others are going through, that's very tough, because when you're trying to send a chat message, you might not really see that other person is burdened with so much work, and that person is really trying to have a focus time, trying to solve a problem. So those things are very difficult in remoting setup. I think in the future, the ideal setup should be a hybrid model where you get to enjoy the perks of working from home and also get to meet the team and go out and have a meal together and also work side by side. That is also important. So I would really like to go to a hybrid setup very soon, but with the current situations and travel issues and all that, it's not easy to achieve. But these are the pros and cons I see in working from home.
Yes, true. So what would be your advice to freshers who are entering the tech industry?
Right. So one thing is, this is something everyone knows, but I don't know whether everyone is practicing this. IT is not a static field. It's very dynamic. Everything changes day in, day out. So you have to really try hard to keep up with new trends. So if you try to constrain yourself into what's being taught at a degree program, that is not going to put you ahead of the competition that you have when you're into the market, because it's very difficult to update the curriculum of a degree program to keep up with these trends. I know the universities are trying hard to do that, but it's simply not practical, because every day there's something new coming up. And then if you try to keep on changing things, that's not that easy. So what you should expect to get from a degree program is the core foundation, because the theories and foundations of computer science doesn't change that much. And you can use those to learn things on your own. So one advice I have is keep on learning, keep reading, subscribe to different articles, and there are curated sites where you can see what's going on in the industry. Try to learn those things on your own. And when you try to go for an interview, for example, have some examples in your some sample code in a GitHub repo somewhere. Because every CV that comes to me, if there's a GitHub link, I would definitely go and have a look at the GitHub repos to see what this individual is doing. If someone has tried hard to keep up with things, that's automatically a plus point. So you have to really keep learning. And then the other thing is, tech industry is very, very, very vast. There are many different things that you can learn. So if you try to learn everything, you will not know deep enough of any of the solutions. This is one of the key pieces of advice that one of my lecturers gave me when I was, I think, during our orientation at that time. So he said, you can be a jack of all trades, but if you want to really, really survive in this industry, you should learn one thing really well. And it can be something very simple as JavaScript, he said. At that time, JavaScript was not very big. It was not a big thing. So his example was more like JavaScript is a simple thing you can learn. But today it has grown into something humongous. Node.js and then all of the front-end frameworks that we have. So it's pretty complex on its own right now. But the core message is that you should know something really well and know what's going on around the area as well in that specific area. So those are some of the things I would advise to the freshers who are entering the industry.
That was surely some valuable advices to all of us. So before we head into the next set of questions, we'd like to go for another short commercial break. We'll be right back before you know it.
ලයිට් බිල ගෙවන්න තියෙනවා කියලා පනිනවා. මේ බොස්ගේ සර්ප්‍රයිස් පාටිකට කීයක් දානවද? හැමෝම අයිපේ කරද්දි ඔයා තාම අයිපේ දාගත්තේ නැද්ද?
බිල් ගෙවන්න එළියට යන අය තව ඉන්නවද?
මේ තාම අයිපේ දාගත්තේ නැද්ද? කෑෂ් ට්‍රාන්ස්ෆර්ස් වගේම ඒ වෙලෙම අයිපේ හරහා බිල් පේමන්ට්ස් කරන්නත් පුළුවන්. හරි ලේසි.
ලංකාවේ වැඩිම දෙනෙක් භාවිතා කරන ෆයිනෑන්ස් ඇප් එක iPay.
welcome back to the show. We have Mr. Johan Lienegay, CTO of Limark Technologies, answering some of our most burning questions. So let's move on to the next set of questions. Cybersecurity is a big challenge for everyone. As a CTO, what is your advice to startups about that?
Okay, that's a good question. So security should not be an afterthought. That's the key message I have, because when we kind of focus on features and when you're trying to get things done, security usually takes a backseat. But the damage of not having the right security in place, it can be disastrous, especially for a startup, because if you lose your reputation, if you lose your customers' information, it's going to be a big problem for the company. It can be a deal breaker as well. So you will not be able to find investors to fund it, and that's going to be a major black mark. Now, this applies to software services companies too. So most of the time when we talk to clients, when we create project plans, it's always about the functional side of things. These features should be available on this day. Security, it doesn't take the front seat. But the reality is that the society that we are living in right now, anyone can be a hacker pretty easily. There are many courses out there. You can just go through an article and figure out how to do basic hacking and all that. So there's a whole lot of people in the world who is trying to gain access to different systems for different reasons. So, and my experience is that if something can go wrong, chances are that it will. So we have to make sure that we think about all of those things. And when you try to bring in some of the security practices into the mix, there'll be resistance from developers, because sometimes something that you can get done pretty easily, you have to jump through a whole bunch of things to achieve the same result when you have a secure environment in place. For example, maybe it could be connecting to a server. You can't just do that. You have to connect to the VPN, go to a jump server, and then get access to the server. But all of these things are very important, because I have seen situations where servers have been hijacked for cryptojacking. So they would go and run their own applications so that they can do Bitcoin mining and things like that. These are very common right now. And then again, there are white hat hackers who are trying to look for security vulnerabilities, and then they will communicate and ask for a bounty. These things happen. But again, if you are a service provider and if you deploy an application where some white hat hacker would come in and then try to communicate to your client and say that, hey, the work that this company did, there are these security loopholes, and I found those, that's not going to be a good thing for your company. So we have to be mindful of all of those things and make sure that security doesn't take the backseat, and make sure that we design and develop with security in mind in each and every step that we take.
Sure. So productivity and efficiency are two important factors in workplace. Could you share some tips to improve them in our day-to-day life?
Right. So I think when we get to that question, we have to kind of define or think about what productivity means to each and everyone. And this is something I myself have gone through, and I have seen others having this same dilemma as well. So for developers or quality engineers, most of the time when we say productivity, we are thinking about writing code and making sure some feature is complete. And or else it will be executing n number of test cases in this much time and all of those things. That is productivity, especially when you are at the engineer level. When you start, that kind of largely represents what productivity would be for you. But then there are different other things as well. Productivity also matters, what did you learn and improve during that time, rather than just cutting a lot of code. Did you learn something that's going to help you to get to the next level? All of those time spent on those activities would also count towards productivity, in my opinion. And then comes the other situation, especially when you get promoted. This I see all the time with tech leads and QE leads. When you get promoted, they automatically feel like their productivity drops down. Now, this is a feeling that they get mainly because their definition of productivity is very different from what the company expects from a lead. So I'm sharing this because one day each and every one of you will go to those levels, and this might really help you to rethink about how you define productivity. So for an engineer, yes, cutting code and executing test cases, these are the productive things. But when you become a lead, you will be spending a lot of time in meetings, talking to other people, grooming juniors, and listening to their problems and all of those things. A lot of people don't count those hours as productivity, so productive hours. So in meetings, I see time to time, people would come in and say, oh, hey, you know what, today I didn't do anything much. I couldn't really code a lot. I was in meetings. But if those meetings really help other people to get their job done better, then that is productivity at a whole different level. Now, there's something that Jeff Bezos said. I can't remember the exact thing that he said, but the gist of the message is that he's not expecting his senior executives to really work a lot, but he's expecting those senior executives to make one good decision every week or every month, some type frequency that makes a difference for the company. This thing applies to tech leads as well. So if you can help someone else or the team to do things better, you are actually amplifying rather than you doing that 8-hour thing. You are enabling about 10 other people to get things done better. That's amplified. So leaders they are to amplify the output of others. And if you spend time doing that, that is productive too. So this is something people tend to not understand. So I think those are very important, but this is another way to look at it. Now, another thing is that when you start leading teams and managing multiple things, you can get lost in the number of things that you have to do. This happens to me all the time. And what helped me is using a simple to-do list in the computer on the side on my screen all the time, so that I know what are the key things I have to get to within a specific day. So that's another little thing that really helps.
Thank you. That was interesting. So finally, what piece of advice would you give someone hoping to head down the same path as yourself?
Yeah, I think we discussed some of those things. So I'll kind of summarize that a little bit again. So one thing is keep learning. Try to pick certain areas and try to specialize on that so that you can be different from others. Because when you try to go and enter the market, and when you are in a company as well, it's always about marketing your skills and marketing yourself. So to do that, you need to have some sort of a unique selling point. So it can be something technical. It can be something where you're good at communicating and making presentations to anything. You should really try to specialize and try to promote that. And the next thing is be confident, but don't be arrogant, and always try to empathize about others, and try to think, if you are in that person's position, how would you see and feel? That really helps to get your points across without being stubborn or arrogant in other people's perspectives. That's very important, because we are not working with machines, we are working with humans with feelings, and that matters a lot. Especially if you want to become a leader, you need to understand how each and everyone feels, and make sure that they know that you are there for them, and truly mean that as well. So these are some of the things I would share with someone who wants to work on the same path.
Thank you very much, sir, for those inspiring words. That brings us to the end of the show. Thank you very much, Mr. Johan Lienegger, for being gracious enough to have accepted our invitation and being a part of this show.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine.
So, viewers, we have come to the end. That's it for this segment, but stay tuned for more interesting content brought to you by ITV.
හරි මේක
හරි මිස් අයියෝ අපි කාඩ් ගන්නෙ නෑනේ කෑෂ් වලින් විතරයි ගන්නෙ
අයියෝ සල්ලි ගෙනාවේ නැහනේ
Thank you. හරිම ස්කෑන් කරන්න.
of course
thank you
මම වගේ IP app එක දාගත්තා නම් ක්‍රෙඩිට් කාඩ් ඇක්සෙප්ට් කරන්නත් පුළුවන් නේ තාම IP දාගත්තේ නැද්ද
ලංකාවේ වැඩිම දෙනෙක් භාවිතා කරන ෆයිනෑන්ස් ඇප් එක iPay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a brilliant day so far, and we hope to make it just that much better with this show of ours. Today, me with Mr. Janit Vimaladasa, the head of business development at Asian Tech. All right, let's go with the show, shall we? Minimalism can mean so many people. What does it mean to you?
Right. Thanks, Deelika, and hi everyone. So basically, I'll be sort of running you guys through sort of some of the concepts about minimalism and sort of non-technical sort of the background to it and how you come about with a good product as well through that, right? So when I talk about minimalism, I'm going to start talking about art, right? So hopefully, despite all of you being technology freaks and sort of, techies, you'd sort of find some interest in this. So when we think minimalism, normally you think about, Pablo Picasso and sort of art, right? So art tends to inspire, we talk about how life inspires art, but then art tends to inspire, technology as well. And like I said, one of the biggest sort of, names in minimalism is Pablo Picasso, right? I'm pretty sure all of you know who he is. And you're probably wondering why I've got a picture of a cow, actually a bull, on the presentation deck. So I'm actually going to run you through a small story about how a bull actually inspired Apple, right? So back in the mid-40s, Pablo Picasso came across this sort of concept of, he was fascinated by the beauty of a bull and he wanted to sort of highlight that beauty, right? So the picture on your sort of right-hand side is what he came up with, right? So it's sort of still a bull, and it looks very simple, right? It's a couple of lines and you feel like, any kid could do this, right? What makes it so important, or is it worth anything? The gist of the story is it took Pablo Picasso 12 months to get to that, actually not 12 months, 2 months to get to that drawing, right? So there were over 11 different iterations of it. And each iteration, as listed here, sort of removed components, merged components, and sort of added simplicity, right? So it wasn't that he looked at the picture of a bull and was like, hey, I can come up with this. And I mean, we look at it and we're like, we could probably come up with this, but it wasn't the case, right? So similarly, even in product design, and sort of when coming up with a product, it's a similar approach, right? You would have a beast of a set of requirements, and it's sort of the skill and the talent that you possess that helps you come up with, something simple and straightforward, right? One of Picasso's assistants was famously quoted saying that Picasso told him, in order to sort of achieve that pure line art, he had to definitely go through all of those stages. You couldn't just jump from, the picture of the bull straight to the line diagram, right? So how does that line diagram sort of inspire product development or Apple in this case, right? So the case study I'll be talking about is, one of the case studies I'll be talking about is a smart TV remote. So most of you guys are probably more familiar with smart TV remotes as TV remotes. Some of you might remember the old, analog dials that you get on the TVs, and the remotes with the batteries that sometimes, you can't change from Rupavani to IT and you're busy hammering the back of the remote, right? So basically, actually before that, in terms of the smart TV remote, the difference between a TV and a smart TV, I think all TVs now are smart in some way, form. You can browse the web, you can sort of check Netflix. If you want to, watch YouTube on the TV, you could do that. If you want to record stuff, everything's done on the TV itself, right? So back in 2014, actually the years before that as well, Google and Apple are sort of diving into smart TVs. Many of you might not remember this, and I think Google will do their best to not remember it as well. So the guys at Google and Sony, they looked at the smart TV and they're like, hey, it's a computer, so we need to give people the ability to sort of use it as a computer. There's a lot of new features. Let's give them buttons to sort of, access a guide, control your DVR, control your TV. If you want to be able to switch on your DVD player, let's give them that ability. And since it's got web browsing, let's also give them a keyboard so they can type stuff and, search. The end result was 148 keys on a TV remote, right? So some people might find this really useful. Most people who watch TV aren't really there to, type out Word documents. And this is what Apple did. Keep in mind, these two devices, the products do the same thing, right? As far as Apple TV's box and Google's TV box were concerned. But Apple used that approach that Pablo Picasso used, right? From a technology standpoint, they're like, let the TV box do the heavy lifting. Most users, most customers, Apple, the way they understood it, weren't really bothered with the complicated stuff when it comes to watching TV. Apple's engineers essentially sat down and they said, users are focused on three things. They want the ability to play or pause something, go to a menu, and have the ability to sort of cycle through a menu list and select something. What you get is essentially 4 buttons actually on something that looks very simple and straightforward and quite attractive when compared to this thing that looks like something out of a science fiction movie, right? So, I mean, people have their different thoughts on this. Some people will definitely find the Google sort of Sony remote a bit more exciting, but the majority of people, and at the end of the day, a majority of your market would be more inclined to buying the Apple TV remote. And that's also reflected in sales as well. I mean, I don't think you can find this remote anywhere, and I struggle to actually find actual pictures of it online, whereas Apple's gone through about 5-6 iterations of the smart TV remote that they have, right? So it comes down to finding the essence of your requirement, right? So when it comes to coming up with a business idea, or in this case, a tech product, you're addressing a gap in the market. You're sort of addressing pain points that users might currently have. So it's important to sort of collect and understand the issues that people are facing and the needs and wants that they have. Similarly, it's important to sort of get all of that, compare them, collate them, and distill them to the most simple and effective solutions. Most, if not all of you, would have done first year and second year maths. And I think this is probably covered in O-level and A-level as well. I mean, it's finding the lowest common denominator, right? So ultimately, you'll be left with a set of user requirements and user stories that I think most BAs would probably be better able to justify this, that help you develop a product, right? But at the same time, just because you're distilling everything doesn't mean you sort of compromise on major things. And I'll actually get into the issues of compromising later on. It's about finding something that makes life easier for the user, but then sort of handles the complexities that are expected of that requirement, right? So I like to think of it like, a line diagram. You're going from point A to point B, and when it comes to product development, it's not straightforward, right? I mean, you have twists and turns, and there's a lot of complexities that are involved in getting something to the end user, whether it's a smartphone or an app, doing calculations. All of that stuff has to be handled in the background, right? Unless, of course, your end user is, a highly technical guy, or, it's a specialized environment, in which case some of the complexity can be left out for them as well. But for all intents and purposes, most users don't really want to be concerned about complicated decisions. You want the technology in the blue box to handle all of that. The downside to making it too simple and compromising, most of you, or some of you, might have heard the story about, how in the 60s, NASA wanted to come up with a sort of a writing instrument for space because your standard ink pen or your ballpoint won't work in low gravity. And the story goes that they spent over $1 million developing this new fancy pen with nitrogen gas inside the canister, ability to write like underwater and in space. And then apparently, the story goes, the Soviet Union at the time brought a pencil and they're like, we can write with this. And the gist is, you know, you don't need to overthink it. You could do something like that. Why, instead of spending $1 million on a pen, you can just buy a Atlas pencil for about 30, 40 rupees and write with that. I feel that's an oversimplification. And I mean, the story is, again, not based on any truth there, right? The Soviets didn't actually bring a pencil. And that comes down to sort of context and understanding user requirement as well, right? So the biggest issue with having a pencil is graphite dust, and you can't have graphite dust in a highly controlled, highly electrical environment such as a space shuttle or, you know, a spaceship control panel, because that can short circuit and you can end up with an explosion, right? So the beauty in it is this pen was actually developed by a pen company, and NASA and the Soviet Union actually bought it. And to be honest, they're still selling it to this day. It's the most commonly used pen in harsh environments. So even though it sounds very complicated, they actually did a lot of the hard work in the product. So users don't actually have to think about it. So anyone who buys this pen is not really concerned about what PSI, the, you know, the ballpoint, the ink's running at, or, you know, what material it's made out of. It does the job for their requirement. If I'm an underwater diver, I can use it. If I'm an astronaut, I can still use it, right? So similarly, I'll jump into some of the work that we've done at Azentec. So we've got a product out called Careers 360. Some of you are probably familiar with it already. And the way we went about it in a very high level nutshell is, you know, we looked at our stakeholders, sort of our users, and we've got job seekers, be it undergrads, graduates, seasoned professionals, and we've also got corporates as well, companies looking for people. And we sort of sat down and sort of tried to understand the pain points that they have and sort of, you know, the things that they wanted from a career side, right? I think I've used job and career here intermittently, but for all intents and purposes, we'll be calling it a career, right? So what do people looking for a new job or career want? Some might not like why they work. They don't know what the best practices are when it comes to applying for a new role. How do you put a CV for, you know, a developer, or how do you put a CV for someone working in finance and admin? Some people didn't know how to find a suitable career path. They just apply on, you know, any site that they see, and like, you know, as long as I get a job and as long as I become permanent, that's fine, which isn't that great, right? At the end of the day, in the long run. Similarly, some people struggle to find what skills are in demand, right? So you might be a project manager and you're like, do I actually go with sort of Prince 2 or do I go with PMP? What's the demand right now in the market? Or even upskilling. Some people might be working in finance and admin or business administration, like, I'd actually like to get into tech, or I'd like to get into marketing. What are the sort of opportunities I have? How do I sort of get those skills? And on the flip side, corporates, they sometimes struggle to find the right person for the requirement. You find a lot of companies making compromises here and there because they can't find that right candidate. People spend too much time going through CVs of different formats, and it makes it very difficult as well to sort of sort through them. Sort of the talk is that, you know, people spend about 30 seconds going through a CV, and I know a lot of people spend more than 2-3 days at a run actually building up a CV. Does it justify spending 30 seconds on one? I mean, some people might say yes, some people might say no on that, right? And then also finding the right person might cost additional cash. I mean, you have to get headhunters involved. You might have to get consultants involved. And it becomes a very costly process. And also in the similar line, there's a lot of data there that you struggle to sort of analyze and sort of decide, okay, are these the right candidates? Are there any issues in our hiring processes? Right. So these are all the pain points, if not, I won't say all, some of the pain points and sort of issues that we sort of identified. So how did we keep it simple there, right? As far as a candidate and a corporate's concerned, they don't need to know what's going on in the background. They've got these pain points and they want them to be able to be solved, right, with whatever the product is. So let's say when it comes to developing a CV or profile, candidates already have CVs written. They might have their, LinkedIn profiles created. We set up a one-click profile creation. So essentially, they can upload their CV or their LinkedIn profile, and the system will create it for them. Templates. So some people might know what the best sort of CV templates are. They'll probably just quickly Google a CV template and try and fill that, but it might not serve the purpose, right? A CV for a UI UX designer is very different to a CV for a QA engineer, right? So similarly, we've got resume templates as well. Upskilling, you don't want to have to constantly go through Google or whatever search engine that you use looking for courses from half a dozen places. We've got all of that set up in Careers 360. So you know what job or career path you're looking at, and then you'll be able to sort of look at what skills are needed and what courses are actually available out there in the market right now, right? All of that complexity, again, done in the green box, right? We've got a scalable cloud platform. We've got machine learning integrated into it to do the data analytics and data crunching. And all the end user really sees is, point A to point B. Similarly, for corporates, skill-based headhunting. I need a QA with 7 years experience. You don't have to actually go through the CVs and see, okay, some of these guys don't even have 7 years. There's guys with like 1 year experience who have actually started applying. You can actually do that filtering right there on the platform itself. Data-driven hiring. It takes out all the complexities. Essentially, you put your requirement in and it gives you your output. These are the candidates that you can look at. It allows you to even do filtering for shortlisting potential candidates as well, right? So without boring you guys, in a nutshell, that's pretty much what the product is, right? From the user's point of view. And it's very important to always understand how your potential user will see the product, because if it becomes too complicated for them, chances are they'll probably drop out, right? Unless you hit that niche where you're the only product in the market, but then that doesn't generally last that long. There's always new companies and new innovations happening every day, right? So, I mean, obviously this is a plug, but if you guys want to find out more about it as well, you can create your profile. It's completely free at Careers 360. And you can also actually get an understanding of how we came about addressing this. I mean, you might find inspiration from the site itself as well. I'm definitely early on time here, but just going back to, before I end off, just going back to the product design. So I know I sort of mentioned some people might find interest in Google and Sony's 148 key, massive TV remote, but market trends generally set the tone, right? So what we're looking at right now is the latest iterations of those remotes. So you can probably see which company sort of shifted their design thinking approach completely and sort of started following another trend, right? So we all have our opinions on which remote might be best, but I think at the end of the day, a majority of the market sort of decided what TV remote style suited them the best, right? And that's pretty evident in the market. So yeah, thank you for your time, and hope you guys found some interest in this. And if you have any sort of queries or, would like to know a bit about what we do at Azentech, feel free to reach out to us in the details on the screen. Thanks. Dilek, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Janith Vibradasa, for being gracious enough to have joined us for this show. And thank you all for turning in for the show. Do stick around for more content on ITV.
As an undergraduate, the first place where you are going to work is really, really important, because that's where you get exposed to the corporate world for the first time.
I love WSO2 because of the usage of middlewares and then the systems like open banking and identity servers. So I just love to learn a lot of experience and work on APIs and get my hands on that so that during my final it will be a really great help.
I was shocked. I was definitely shocked. I didn't expect to get in, and I was ecstatic.
I remember getting the call. They said I was accepted, and I was really happy. And yeah, it's a dream come true.
I was happy, and I really can't explain in words. To be honest, during this pandemic situation and all, to get an internship, it's really hard, and I really feel grateful to WSO2 to take me as an intern.
මට හෙට එන්න වෙන්නේ half day. බොස්ස හෝ ෂේප් එකක් දාගන්න පුළුවන් නේද? හරි හරි. කොහෙද හෙට යන්නේ? නෑ මේ බැංකුවට අලුත් account එකක් open කරන්නයි පරණ account එකේ මේ statement එකක් ගන්නයි. ඉතින් මොනවද මේ පෙරලගෙන හොයන්නේ? මගේ fixed deposit එකේ certificate එක නැහැනේ. තාම IP දාගත්තේ නැද්ද? දැන් මේ ෆෝන් එකේ තියෙන IP app එකෙන්ම digital savings account එකක් open කරන්නත් ඕනම වෙලාවක account statements බලා ගන්න වගේම fixed deposit එකක් දාගන්නත් ලේසියෙන්ම පුළුවන්. මොකට රස්තිය අඩු වෙනවද?
ලංකාවේ වැඩිම දෙනෙක් භාවිතා කරන ෆයිනෑන්ස් ඇප් එක iPay.